The following program is a Creative Magic Network production. Hey guys, December 3rd is the deadline to enter the contest to win Lance Secretan's powerful book on inspiring leadership, titled The Spark, the Flame, and the Torch. Inspire yourself, inspire others, inspire the world. And the best part, the book is in hardcover. That's right, hardcovers are hard to get these days. So if you haven't already, you can enter the contest by going to frederickbuy.com. That's Frederick with a C, buy like bye-bye.com, and enter your email in the pop-up that will appear at the top of your screen. Have a great episode.
You're listening to the Frederick Buy Show, where sky is the limit and space is the place. Here's your host, Frederick Buy.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome. Come on in, sit down, relax, put your earbuds on. This is the Frederick Buy Show, and this radio podcast is about unleashing your creativity. We talk to experts who step into the unknown. It is an inspirational, magical, intuitive radio podcast as we chat with charismatic enigmas from around the globe. That's right, musicians, singers, authors, radio hosts, business people, everything in between. I am Frederick Buy, the man of the hour, the man with the power too sweet to be sour, funky like a monkey. Hey, I sting like a bee, produce sweet honey, and I am ready. And I am your favorite French knocker. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subject of all, writing. Story, creativity. We have a fiction author on today. I love fiction authors. For those of you who have been listening to this show for a while, you know that I love fiction authors because I love to talk creativity. I love to get into the mind, the head of somebody who is a creative person. It is fascinating because the creative process is something that nobody can define. And we're going to ask her today what her creative process is. Her name is Mary Morony. She's the author of Dawn Growed Up, Book 2 of her Apron Strings trilogy, a series of novels that moves from the South to New York City and back between the 1950s and the early 21st century. It draws on the life she knew growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you so much, Frederick. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah. All right. You're a fiction author. It's a book that takes place, in the 50s. It's inspired from your real life, if I'm not mistaken. But right before we get into it, though, give us an idea here of your background a little bit. Who are you?
Okay,
Mary?
I'm old. I'm old. I grew up in the 50s in the South, and well, I didn't actually grow up in the 50s. I didn't grow up until about 10 years ago, but I was raised in the 50s. Actually, I'm not even sure if I grew up 10 years ago, but anyway, That's a whole nother story. I was raised in the 50s during the whole integration, desegregation thing. I had the great privilege of being raised by a Black woman who didn't buy into all the racial hatred and loved me as a person and taught me to love people as people, not necessarily because they had a color of skin that was different or the same as mine. So I feel like I was tremendously blessed in that regard.
Mm-hmm. The Black woman.
I wrote the book.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I was going to say I wrote my first book, Apron Strings, because the relationship was so important to me, and I didn't see anywhere in fiction where that relationship was in a book to any great degree. And shortly after that, after I started writing the book, The Help came out, which touches on the relationship between a Black housekeeper and the children in the house, but it didn't touch on it the way I had experienced it. So I just got my book published and did it.
Mm-hmm. The Black woman you're talking about, you see, you were raised by a Black woman. You had a family's maid, right? And she was the Black woman you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you lived in the era of segregated schools. I'm curious, what was your experience as a white female? How did you perceive black people, and how were you taught to perceive them?
Well, that's why I think I'm so privileged, because since the most important person in my life was black, I didn't perceive, and there were lots of black people in my household because Lottie, the maid, had friends that came to visit all the time. So there was an ebb and flow of black people all the time. So I had a wide variety of friends, and I say friends because they were people I saw on a regular basis who were not the same color as, for example, my family, but it wasn't strange or odd to me. And in the town I grew up in, it didn't seem to be. I mean, I think there was a lot of racial dissent and anger, but I didn't feel it. I was too young and didn't understand that life was any different than what happened in the kitchen in our household.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Did you see a main difference between you and the other kids, other white females or males at that time, other white kids? Like, could you...
No, I didn't. I didn't. Because most kids I knew were in similar situations. When I got to high school, there was it got to be, because then the grammar school I went to was pretty much the same neighborhood I grew up in, and it was just outside the University of Virginia. So it was a smaller, more privileged, I guess, neighborhood than all of the Charlottesville. So when I went to the public high school, and I realized that there was a lot more racism there than there was in the little tiny grammar school I went to.
Oh, really?
If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are people, because in the bigger high school aspect, people didn't necessarily have anything to do with people of another race. So most of what we're afraid of is what we don't know.
Mm. Yeah, and that's a good period. Right now, that's what we see right now too. But we're not gonna get into that, right? We're not a political show. But
the politics, and no, I'm not moving to Canada.
Yeah. The government site crashed. Unbelievable. For immigrants from the U.S. Anyway, that's another story. Okay, so what kind of kid were you? Were you a troublemaker? Were you a kid who was always in her head? Were you journaling? Were you feeling, those deep feelings and writing them down? Were you a big reader? What kind of kid were you?
I was a big reader. I was a tomboy. I was a bossy, pushy brat that pretty much told everybody what I thought they ought to do. And I was outside a lot. When I wasn't outside, I was reading a book. I spent as little time as I possibly could with grown-ups in my household because they were not much fun. And back then, kids didn't hang out with grown-ups so much, at least not in the world I lived in. Grown-ups had their own thing, and it didn't have much to do with children.
Mm-hmm. You were a tomboy. You said you were...
Yeah, I was a tomboy. I climbed trees and rode horses and didn't wear shoes, and yeah.
Were you and you were bossy? You say you were bossy. Were you bossy in when you started to get into the job market? When you started to get a career and stuff like that too. Had you changed by then?
Yeah. I wasn't too bossy then. I just I was a pretty miserable employee. I really had to come up with something to do with my time that had more to do with my running my time than a boss running my time.
Right. Yeah, so, a lot of people feel that way. I certainly feel that way. And maybe that's why you became a writer.
I think creative types have a hard time being told what to do, and I think that whole sort of being in a cubicle all day long and not seeing the sunshine is a little hard on creative people.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I think it's probably really hard on most people, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but that's a whole nother.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of books did you read back then? Who were your favorite authors?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, Nancy Drew was my favorite author in the whole wide world. I read not author, but she was my favorite character. I don't remember. I'm embarrassed to say I don't even remember who wrote Nancy Drew, but I read every single Nancy Drew book that ever was written when I was a kid. I read, so I love mysteries. I read all kinds of, we had a fairy tale book that was really big, and it had all kinds of Hans Christian Andersen and all the famous fairy tales, and I used to read that all of the time.
Wow.
Right. And I was also a big, even young, I was a big Mark Twain fan, and I think he's probably my favorite writer.
Once again, we're here with Mary Morony. She's the author of Done Growed Up, book 2 of her Apron Strings trilogy, a series of novels that moves from the South to New York City and back between the 1950s and the early 21st century. It draws on the life she knew growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia. And guys, ready for continuing this conversation? If you have a passion, something that fuels a curiosity, well, on top of getting fascinating interviews, such as this one, straight to your inbox, when you subscribe to our free Creative Magic community, you will get super cool exclusive gifts in return, such as the ebook, Happiness Quotes by the Ambassador of Happiness herself, Maura Sweeney, one of our hosts, and also an exclusive conversation with two of my favorite people, Alex Okoroji and the blind blogger Max Ivy, as we talk about the influence of friends and college education on our lives, the competitiveness in a crowded field, the importance of business and financial education and arts and entrepreneurship, and more. And also, Alex has a special gift for you inside. I promise you will get inspired and entertained. Subscribe for free at FrederickBuy.com. That's Frederick with a C, buy like bye-bye.com. Okay, your book touches on a variety of subjects, Mary, and one of them is divorce. And I know I read that your parents divorced when you were a child, and I know in the book the parents of Sallee divorced. Because divorce was perceived differently back then than it is now. How was divorce perceived during your childhood?
Well, it didn't happen. I mean, we were freaks of nature. It's sort of, people just whispered about, you'd walk into a room and people were like, their parents got divorced.
My
gosh. That's how bizarre it was back then.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come up to write this book? What was the journey to this book, to the second book?
To the second book. Okay, well, the first book was because it's not the story of my life, though it is the energetic of the story of my life, if that makes any sense to you. It's not the actual story of my life, but a lot of the energy that was in that story was about my life. The second book, I kind of felt like the character in the first book, Ginny, got a raw deal. And Ginny was the mother figure in the first book, and I thought she got a raw deal. And I thought since most women in the 50s got kind of a raw deal, I'd do my best to at least help Ginny along. So I wrote Done Growed Up for Ginny to find her way out of the mire that she had found herself in Apron Strings. Mm-hmm. I think I did a good job of not giving away any of the plot there. Yes.
How did you come up with the character Sallee, the 12-year-old? Is it challenging as an adult to write from a perspective of a 12-year-old? Or, how did you come up with that character?
Well, no, it isn't. It isn't difficult to write if you're pretty childish yourself.
Okay. But how did she come up? How did she come up to be one of your characters?
Well, she came up to be one of the characters because, well, first of all, I was dealing with some pretty heavy stuff that most people don't necessarily want to read about because it's so heavy. So I had to figure out a way to write about stuff to lighten it up some. And I thought the best way to do that was to give it a child's perspective, because when a child starts to try to wrap her head around racism, she can come up with some pretty funny and silly things about it, or divorce, because grown-ups look completely different from a child's perspective. Yep.
No, I was just going to say, aren't grown-ups sometimes just a pain in the butt with their perspectives?
Yeah. Especially if they take themselves terribly seriously. I mean, I think from my humble opinion is that people who take themselves seriously are a pain in the butt, whether they're grown up or they're children. And there are a lot of children these days that take themselves pretty seriously too.
Yeah, didn't you used to take yourself seriously back then when you were a tomboy with no shoes on and climbing trees?
Not too terribly seriously. I've always been blessed with a pretty good sense of humor and the ability to laugh at myself. The only time I ever took myself too seriously was when my brother was picking on me.
Okay. The book is filled with real soul-searching stories to which, we can all relate. And which stories can the reader expect? What do you mean by that?
What kind of stories can they? Well, they could expect lots of family dysfunction. I think everybody can relate to that, whether they want to or not. Mm-hmm. There's alcoholism. There's divorce. There's child abuse. There's drug addiction. There, you name it. It's pretty much it. It pretty much runs the gamut of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very
not heavy. I don't think it's heavy or dark. I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. It's fiction, but the entire trilogy is based on the hard truths of living in the South in the late 50s to early 60s. Why did you choose this time period, and what do you mean by hard truths?
Hard
truths.
Yeah. Well, I picked the time period because I thought it was, despite the fact that the 50s were known as the decade where nothing happened, I thought a lot of stuff did happen, so I started it in the 50s. And the 60s was the time when everything was happening, so I just carried it forward there. And then actually the first two books, one set in the late 50s, the second one set in the early 60s, and the third book, which isn't out yet but is finished, takes place in 2008.
Okay. Talk to us about the transition of her mom, Ginny, from the drunken, abusive woman she was to the now, sober, kind, caring woman she seems to be. What's the inspiration behind it, and what can the reader learn from it? Because I think a lot of people can, relate to that.
Well, okay, except for there goes all my brilliantly planned, not giving away any any plots, but that's okay. Ginny was definitely Ginny in book one was definitely overwhelmed and under aware of how to handle her situation. She just didn't have the tools to take care of the life that she had created for herself. So what she did, and what a lot of people do, is she drank, and she drank until it got to be a problem. So she was under-equipped. That was the word I was looking for. So she was overwhelmed and under-equipped for her life. So after I finished that book and realized that, a lot of people, women, particularly in the late 50s, they had life wasn't like it was on television, like Leave It to Beaver with his mother, who apparently all she had to do was put on her pearls and a pretty dress and show up. There were a lot of hardships in the 50s and 60s that women did, and they didn't have the resources they had now. There wasn't psychiatrists were not somebody that you went to see on a fairly regular basis like you do now. They didn't have therapists like they were now. All of that stuff was sort of taboo and embarrassing, and so there wasn't a whole lot of help for a woman who was in the situation that Jenny was in. Mm-hmm. But there was AA, so I decided in the second book I'd send Jenny to AA. And due to some circumstances that happened in the second book, and we won't give those away, she pulled herself together and got on with her life, which I thought was a really pretty great thing to do, because, it's really hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And even if you love your children more than you can possibly say, alcoholism is a hard disease to overcome. So the fact that Jenny did, I thought would be inspiring to other people. And that's why I wrote that. But people in Done Growed Up, all of the characters in Done Growed Up did some serious growing up, not just Jenny. Everybody did.
You mentioned the hardships women in the 50s had to face, and they didn't have the resources they did. And, on the surface, on television, it was like this perfect family, but, women in the 50s, was not that way. And what do you mean by hardships women had to face back then? Because maybe we forgot about them. You know what I mean? Maybe what kind of hardships did they have to face?
Well, they had the same hardships we have to face now, but I think that we've made some progress. Like, for example, back in the 50s, if you got pregnant and you didn't necessarily weren't in a position to be able to be pregnant, but you were kind of stuck. I understand that is a religious thing too, but still, the fact is that in the 50s, it was against the law to have an abortion. They didn't have, life was just as hard then as it is now, despite the fact that there's the good old days and back in the other place where America was great. Remember back then?
Right.
All of that is just sheer fiction. Life is hard. It was hard in the 50s. It was hard in the 60s. It was hard in the 40s. Life is hard. And I think we forget because we read stories, we see movies, we see television shows, and we don't get that they don't necessarily point out just the day-to-day drudgery of life. And for example, this is one of the things that I really enjoyed doing in the book. We take cell phones for granted. If you go out without your cell phone, you kind of feel like you've almost gone out undressed, Yeah. Back in the before cell phones, and they didn't even happen, weren't even thought of in the 50s. If you had to make a phone call or you needed to get in touch with somebody, you had to stick by the damn telephone. You had to stay there. It was like a lifeline. That was where you had to stay. It could eat up your whole day waiting to hear from a doctor, for example. Now, you just take your cell phone with you and trot out to do whatever you have to do. And if the doctor calls, you got it right there in your hip pocket. There are those little insidious little things that we don't think of are some of the hardships I'm talking about.
Yeah, right. All right, let's talk a little bit about your style of writing. The setting. Are you what type of writer are you when it comes to setting? Some writers are able to, and what can a reader expect? In that, some writers can invent the world in their heads and write it, in detail, right? Like a Harry Potter or whatever. And there are writers who kind of, they have to write something that's real. They have to be, let's say, if they want to write about a city, they're going to go to that city and they got to feel it, be there. What can a reader expect here? What's your style of writing when it comes to the setting?
That is an interesting question. I think I'm more of a gotta be there sort of person, but only partially. My fourth book, which is based in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in the 1940s, in the early 40s, when they were just building the bomb. I mean, Oak Ridge, Tennessee was a secret city that they created to build the nuclear bomb that they dropped on Japan. I was writing, I had already started the book, but I went to Oak Ridge this summer just to get a sense of the space, of the place, of the houses. I mean, I'd seen pictures, I'd seen all that, but I kind of had to get a sense of it before I could really write about it. Not that it looks like it did back then, but I still had to get sort of a sense of if I stood on this hill, what did it look like from there and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose I need to have I guess I can't just create something out of, or at least a scene out of nothing.
Right.
However, most of my New York scenes in the books, not that I haven't been to New York, but most of my New York scenes I just created out of thin air.
All right, once again, we're here with Mary Morony. She's the author of Done Growed Up, book 2 of her Apron Strings trilogy, a series of novels that moves from the South to New York City and back between the 1950s and the early 21st century. It draws on the life she knew growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's not the story of her life, but it's kind of inspired by it a little bit. And guys, right before continuing this conversation, are you an Amazon shopper? When you use our Amazon links at frederickby.com, Amazon kicks back a few bucks to the show and it helps cover production costs. No additional cost to you, no hidden fees, no nothing, no BS. So if you like what you hear, you can help by going over to frederickby.com, Frederick with a C, buy like bye-bye.com, and click the Amazon link in the sidebar for all your online shopping. It is really that simple, and bookmark it to find it easier. I'm curious, Mary, do you know the author Henry Miller?
Yeah.
Did you ever read him?
Yes.
And what did you think of him? I'm just asking because he's definitely, I think, on my top 3 favorite authors of all time. But I'm just asking if you've ever read him and what did you think of him?
I read him in school, so clearly, anybody I read in school and I didn't take out of school never really hit my top 10 hit parade.
Oh, okay. So you did.
If I didn't read him now, I wouldn't love him. And I don't. Even having said that, I still. I go back to Mark Twain as my. I read Mark Twain in school too, but I had started reading Mark Twain before I read him in school, and I don't know whether it's because I found him first, and it wasn't. I was not a good student. I was not a good student, and I was a rebellious student. So if somebody said read this, I wasn't necessarily going to ever enjoy it. But Mark Twain was one of the few exceptions. I adored Mark Twain. I wish that if I could write like anybody in the world, it would be just like Mark Twain.
I was asking because I think that Henry Miller is kind of the forgotten. Well, I don't think he's forgotten necessarily, but I think he's not enough mentioned in my opinion, some of the greatest writers in the world. There are a few writers who really give me that kind of. They make me smirk and smile, like he does. I mean. Anyway, I just thought that, because your book is in the 50s and stuff, he wrote while it was in the 30s and stuff. So I just thought maybe you would know him and we could talk about him. But anyway, forget about him.
No, I'm not going to talk about him. I'm actually going to go read a book of Henry Miller so I can remind myself now. Because I love it when someone loves an author. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Especially an author that, is not of your generation. Like, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
So that's like, and what I learned from his books is that even, our world is the same. Our fears are the same, no matter what the generations are. You know what I mean? Like, I can relate to his books, even if they're written in their 30s. I can relate to how he thinks and everything. So it's just our technology changed, but the core feelings and struggles are the same, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I used to do Dickens. Dickens was another one of my favorite writers, and all those, I mean, the people there still suffered from the same thing. Jane Austen, the same thing. You know, things don't really change that much.
Yeah. Okay. What's easier for you to write? Some writers, it's dialogue. You know, some writers is the setting, the description. Some other people are the characters, right? What's the most challenging thing for you to write when you write a story? What's the pain in the butt?
You know, I'm not sure. Well, I guess getting started is the most challenging thing for me. I don't know how other people write because I'm not in a writing group, which I think might be a helpful thing to do. And if I didn't live so far out in the country and I weren't such an introvert, I'd probably join a writing group. But the way I start is I dream up characters, and then I just start writing the character. I just start writing sort of like not a character study, because that would be like work. I just start writing about what the character would do in what I think might end up being a book, and then I let the characters lead me. I know that doesn't make much sense, but that's really how I go about it.
No, I think it does make sense. I think for a creative person, it does make sense. Do you find that creativity sometimes you have to step back? You have to kind of let creativity take you where it wants you to go. You know what I mean? You have to kind of get yourself in the background, step in the background type thing. Don't you find that? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I tell this every time anybody ever asks me. I say, and I didn't believe it when I first heard it, but my characters run the show. I can't make a character do what a character won't do. I might have something I want, a place I want the plot to go, and if I can't make a character go there if the character is not willing to. And I know that sounds absurd, but it's true. I can't do it.
Yeah. So I don't think that's absurd. I don't think maybe for somebody who's not a creative person, that's like, you know, but yeah, I anyway, I hear you. Okay.
And Joy, I love dialogue. I really love writing dialogue.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be one of my questions. So your favorite would be writing dialogue?
And creating characters. Those are my two favorites.
Why dialogue?
Why dialogue? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just love to hear people talk. I love to hear conversations. I'm nosy, and I'll sit in a restaurant and listen to people talk. Not necessarily because I'm eavesdropping on their conversation, but just listening to sort of the way they talk and how they use their words, and maybe sort of what they're talking about, but not like, I mean, it's not creepy like I'm what is that thing called where you're following people around all the time? I'm not
I know
stalking.
Yeah.
I'm not stalking them, but I am just sort of listening to their dialogue, so I can sort of recreate it in some ways. And I can it's really funny what will spark, for example, a dialogue. It can be one word. One word I can write an entire chapter on one word I heard somewhere. I can write an entire character on just some strange quirk I heard. As a matter of fact, there's a woman in the gym where I work out who has a laugh that I've never heard a laugh like it to save I've never heard a laugh. And I've really been trying hard to figure out how to describe this laugh, how to make it so that the reader can hear it. But I have a whole character that's based on this woman's laugh. So
isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy how you write a line, then the response comes to you? You know, it's like, I don't want to say it's a voice in your head, but it's just the responses are there. Like, how can you explain that?
Well, it's definitely a voice in my head.
Yeah.
I got a lot of those. It's, I don't know. It's really, the other thing that I do that's really sort of an organic way to write is if I'm writing away and things are sort of coming along, and then I hit a dead end, I'll go for a walk. I'll just put it all down and I'll go outside and I'll go for a walk, or I go do something completely, totally different and come back to it, and the problem tends to get solved, which is a nice thing. So I think I'm saying I get myself out of the way.
Yeah. There you go. Do you ever get writer's block?
Huh?
Do you ever get writer's block?
Yeah, I get writer's block. As a matter of fact, I've got writer's block right now. My fourth book, I wrote, I think I've written about 15,000 words. By the way, I love Scrivener. Scrivener is the word processor for novelists, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
So what I do is I set up a number. I set up the deadline for when I want my book finished, and then Scrivener tells me how many words I have to write a day to get to that deadline. So right this minute, Scrivener is adding up all the days that I'm not writing. So at one point, I only had to write 450 words a day. I think now I've got to write about 3,000 words a day to get to my deadline. So I'm just not in a place right this minute where I can write this book. But that doesn't mean that I won't be tomorrow. And the other thing that's really interesting about that whole thing is once it becomes clear to me which way I want to go, I can make up that whole, I can write 5,000 words in a day. Yeah. I mean, it can just flow. So I don't really get too wigged out about writer's block, and I don't have a thing. I don't have what's called a deadline. I mean, there are no hard deadlines in my life. So if I don't write it for a month, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you see the difference between writing by hand and writing by computer, if you've ever written by hand?
Well, yeah, the difference for me is when writing by hand, I can't read a damn thing I wrote.
Okay. It's not, because sometimes as writers, I think when you write by hand, it's like it flows more. I don't know, you're closer to the words and the I don't know, to the story. Don't you find that? Don't you find sometimes that a processor is a little more distant?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I do have to say that sometimes when I get an idea or a thought and I don't have the word processor there, I can write it down despite the fact that I'm probably not going to be able to read what I wrote. The fact that I wrote it down, it sort of cements the idea in my mind so that when I do get to my writing tool of preference, it can just flow.
Mm-hmm. Dr. J, go ahead.
I was the other thing, there's that function key that you can push. You can click twice on the far left-hand side of your bottom of your keyboard, that little FN key. You can push that and you can speak to your computer. At least on Macs, you can just speak to your computer and it will type what you say.
Does it work well? Because I tried that before, and does it work well? Does it translate right?
It works better than Siri does.
Okay.
It works better than Siri does, and it works well enough that if I just want to kind of get the idea down there, it works well enough that I can go back later and edit what's there. But the idea is on the computer. So yeah, it works. I mean, I wouldn't submit it as a finished I would not use that to write a whole book, but I do sometimes write sections of a book using that process and then going back and, editing and cleaning up and stuff. Because sometimes just writing doesn't make any difference what you're writing. You're just writing, and in the editing process, something really beautiful comes out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got a few minutes left. Let me ask you this: a lot of readers one day would like to be writers, and they don't know how to get started. They don't know how to get published. They don't know how they're intimidated by the industry. What's your journey to getting published?
Well, let me just say I'm right there with them. I don't know. I don't know how to get published either. I mean, other than create space, I honestly don't know. I think you have to write the best. I think you have to write the best you can possibly write. I think you have to have the patience of Job, and I think you have to not give up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, okay, even create space. Okay. You use create space, but what did you do before that? Did you wrote a first draft, then give it to an editor, and then edit it from there, and then how did you come to create space? What are the steps?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I write the first draft. I reread the first draft, and I write the 10th draft. In other words, there's a whole bunch between the first draft and the 10th draft. And then after that, I read it. I give it to somebody to read, and then I rewrite it again, and then I give it to somebody else to read. And if you're in a writers group, which again I think would be a really good idea, you get you can find people that will critique your work, and that's really invaluable, to have people who are writers critique your work, because they understand where you're coming from, they understand what you need, they understand the whole process. Since I'm not a writers group, and I would ask people to read my stuff a lot of times, and none of them were necessarily writers, I would get, I like it. Well, great. You like what? What do you like? I like it doesn't help. Can you tell me what you don't like? Well, I didn't like this. Okay, why didn't you like this? Well, I don't know. So get knowledgeable critiquers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And after you've gone through the rewriting process a zillion times, then you can send it to somebody and have somebody that's in the know really read it. Mm-hmm. And get over yourself, too. Really get over yourself. Because if you want to be a writer, you can be a writer. And it's going to take time, and it's hard on your ego. But if you want to be a writer, anybody can write.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Anybody can.
For the writing newbies, would you advise to go to School of Arts before expecting to get published, or before publishing themselves a book? Or School of Arts, I mean the school of getting a bachelor's degree in arts.
No, I wouldn't. I think that like I said, I think anybody can write. I think that, I think school sometimes it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz. I went back to school and got a degree in creative writing because I had such little sense of my ability to write that I needed somebody to accredit it. Sort of like in the Wizard of Oz with the Scarecrow, he didn't have a brain. He didn't think he had a brain, and he needed the wizard to give him a diploma, so he thought that, so to assure him that he had a brain, even though he had a brain. So, yeah, if you need that sort of assurance, then do it. But if you don't, and I don't think that everybody does, I don't think I just let it go too long, because I was in my 40s. Mm-hmm. And insecure.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I find I hang out with a bunch of writers, and that's a big thing. It seems that we're so sensitive when it comes to our art, and it's normal. I mean, it's understandable, obviously, but it seems that writers are insecure on another level. You know what I mean? On how people are going to judge me, people are going to, you know what I mean? They're going to laugh at me, or they're going to, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know.
Self-conscious.
Well, yeah, because there's so many different criteria to be judged. First of all, whether or not you can actually put two words together and make a sentence. That's one way to be judged, and that's hard. The second one is if you write about anything that matters, then you put your heart in it. If you put your heart in it, then you have to show it to the world. That's really hard. And then thirdly, you want it to matter. So you want people to respond to it. And if they don't respond the way you want, or that you think that you want them to respond to it, that's hard. And then, so you got to talk yourself into knowing that any response is a good response. Any response is good. That you've touched somebody is important. And I think that's the whole point of the creative process, that you've actually touched another heart. That's a hard place to get to, by the way.
Yeah, I think, it's like being polarizing a little bit, or being like, for example, right? I'm going to give, and again, it's not a political show, but, you got Trump, like, he's going to say things that people speak to people's guts. You know what I mean? But, and I feel sometimes that it's, as writers, it's like writers cannot be too nice. Sometimes writers are so afraid of being judged that they're so nice in their writing, and they don't want to offend anybody. So they kind of, sometimes, and this is one of the things that I loved about Henry Miller too, is that, man, it's straight to the point. It's like they speak to your gut. You know what? You understand what I'm saying? Like in your book, you have bigotry, addiction, divorce, racism, and it's important to have these types of subjects in. You got to speak to their guts, in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
Right. Mine too. Yeah. I mean, I think there's room in the world for all of it. I mean, it doesn't all have to be speaking from the gut. But if you don't have heart in your endeavor, whether it's painting or photography or writing or whatever it is, nobody's going to be impressed. Nobody's going to be touched. Nobody's going to be interested, so that means that you have to be vulnerable. You have to allow. You have to expose your heart. And we live in a world where that's not exactly easy to do.
Right. All right, we're going to wrap this up. What's in store for us in the third and final book of the trilogy?
The family. The entire Mackey family is gathered together from the great-grandparents all the way down to great-grandchildren for a family wedding and they get snowed in for the wedding, and things come out that nobody could ever have imagined.
Awesome.
So I can say that Ginny Mackey, the mother of the Mackey tribe, and grandmother, would never have imagined in a million years that one of hers might be a producer of pornography.
Okay. Talking about speaking from the guts, talking about, yeah, that's good. All right. Where can we buy your book and where can we find you?
I'm on Amazon, so we could go to your site. We go to your site, push your little button, and go to marymorony.com or Mary Morony, and either one of my books, Apron Strings Trilogy, or Done Growed Up. And then you'd get a little something, and I'd get the book sold. Or you can go to my website, marymorony.com, and sign up for all of my blog posts. Because in my blogs, I write about timely things. Like, for example, yesterday I wrote about the election. But I also write from my characters in the Mackey family. I keep the characters alive, and so I write vignettes about the characters, so that, because one of my favorite things is when I read a book that I really like a character. It's like I mourn the character. So instead of mourning the characters still live on my blog. And every Saturday, I post a Southern recipe that Ethel, the maid, might have cooked.
Awesome.
So marymorony.com.
Alrighty, thank you guys. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you again, Mary. I love these types of conversation. You guys know this. You know this. And I really, really appreciated it. It gives me the itch to write, man. Geez, I gotta write. I gotta publish my books, man. I got to. Anyway, I want to thank Mary for her insightful conversation. What a wonderful, kind lady. And by the way, guys, if you're an editor, I'm looking for an editor right now for my books. Where we got a first draft, a few drafts, written. And so if I'm looking for an editor, guys, when you pick up Mary's book from our website at frederickby.com, and Amazon kicks back a few bucks to the network, and it helps cover production costs. No hidden fees, no nothing. frederickby.com, Frederick with a C, by like bye-bye.com, and click the link to her book and to this conversation, and it's that simple. It's that simple in the blog. Also, we're looking for new hosts, guys. If you're a podcaster, if you're looking to expand your listenership, if you're looking to be part of a positively, if you are an entrepreneurial, two, a positively oriented entrepreneur or a podcaster, and you like to talk about positive subjects, give us a shout out and at the Creative Magic Network. Actually, you can go to frederickby.com and click become a host, and check us out. We can talk. We'll chat about what we can do. And also we give podcast training too. If you guys want to start a podcast, you're not sure how. And it's, guys, this network is really at its infancy, and it's really, our rates are really low compared to the competition out there, really. And, so it's worth, I think, checking us out. Also, would like to thank those who pledged to our Patreon page. You are really helpful to the show, and we are grateful for your help. In case you're wondering, Patreon is a simple way for you to contribute to the podcast every single month and get super cool rewards in return. I promise you will love the perks. Our Patreon page is at frederickby.com. That's Frederick with a C, by like bye-bye.com. Click Patreon in the header, and money is used to cover our editing time and production cost. You can contribute for as low as $1, one little dollar. The Creative Magic Store, open well, t-shirts, mugs, DVDs, recommended reading, a bunch of cool stuff. Christmas is coming. Go to the Creative Magic Store, check us out. It's called Design with Meaning. It's meant to inspire you, tap into your intuition, and add a little bit of magic into your life. This podcast is free every time you download it on iTunes, Stitcher, and whatever platform you're on. So please go over there, subscribe. It is listener supported. Tell a friend, leave a 5-star review. Really helps brother out. As for me, it's time to ride off into the sunset, and I got a bunch of books to read. I want to do a giveaway real soon. It's pretty gonna be cool. I have a few books that a publicist sent me, and I love that. And then I can give them to you. I can create contests and give them to you. So with this, guys, I'm gonna go out, do a little bit of laundry or whatever, and don't forget, live with purpose, passion, fire, and love. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Frederick By Show. For more information, go to frederickby.com. That's Frederick with a C, by like bye-bye.com.